Hey everybody, I'm Ramon Mejia from the LitRPG Podcast. Welcome to episode number 67 of the show. I bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and author interviews every single week. Now this week is extra special because I'm recording this podcast a little bit early than normal by about a day or two. And by the time most people are going to be watching this, I'll actually be at DragonCon representing the LitRPG community there at a booth we have inside DragonCon, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Additionally, you'll notice that this particular episode, if you're watching the video version, it looks a little bit different. This is a slightly more streamlined version just because I won't have the usual time I have for editing and adding stuff, so it'll look like this just for this episode. And if you really like it, let me know. We'll keep it, but otherwise I'll go back to the other 4 next week. But this week, I have 6 new LitRPG reviews for you folks. Now, this is going to include some new things here, including the Shattered Land, the LitRPG series, Unexplored, Rise of the Crimson Kingdom, Out of Her Depth, The Tale of the City and the Dungeon, also Zandaria, the Unintentional Troll, Book 1, also the Savant Lands, The Lost Class, and last but not least, Pawn, the Strategy Series, Book 1. Of course, we're going to begin our show, though, with LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with a story about The Way of the Shaman. The Way of the Shaman comic book is now available. This is the same story from the first book in the Way of the Shaman series. It is now a comic book. I remember talking to Vasily Mihenko about this particular project of his quite a while ago, and I'm happy to see that it's finally available. It's also available on the author's website at myhenko.ru and also at Comixology for you to purchase. Looks nice, and if you're a comic fan, this might be something you want to pick up if you're also a Way of the Shaman fan. So there you go. Also in LitRPG news, we got some great book deals coming up for you for the holiday weekend, including Delvers LLC Book 1 is going to be 50% off over Labor Day weekend starting August the 31st, and Adventures Ontario Book 1 and 2 are going to be 50% off the normal price till starting on August the 1st all the way until the 5th of the month of September, I should say. Also, Dungeonborn's price is going to be dropped to $1.99. Also, the entire Hell's Glitch series is going to be 99 cents. Super Sales and Superheroes is also going to be 99 cents from August the 31st to September the 5th. And this one's free. Ascend Online is going to be free. Book 1, the entire weekend starting August 31st. So lots of good deals there, folks. Also in LitRPG news, we have the upcoming LitRPG Awards. Yay! This thing is organized by Alaron Kong. The awards were presented at the LitRPG Gala, I believe, which is going to be this upcoming Saturday in Atlanta, Georgia, from 2 to 5 p.m., I believe, at the Arcade, which is a bar in Atlanta. There are 4 different categories that you can vote on at the LitRPG Facebook group, including favorite LitRPG series, and the nominations for those are The Land, Awaken Online, Emerelia, Way of the Shaman, and Viridian Engage. So those 4 series have been nominated for that particular award. For the award of favorite LitRPG individual novels, we have The Land Founding, Awaken Online Catharsis, The Trap Mine Project, which is Emerelia Book 1, The Survival Quest, Way of the Shaman Book 1, and Dungeonborn. So there you go. Those are those nominations. In favorite new LitRPG author, and this is since September 2016 until the upcoming LitRPG Awards, the nominees are Dakota Crouch for The Divine Dungeon, Luke Chimolenko for Ascend Online, Shimer Kuznets for Life Reset, and R.A. Mejia for Adventures on Terra. Yep, that's right. I got a nomination. Also, the last category is going to be favorite Royal Road story. So these are stories from the Royal Road, which is a online free way for people to put their stories available on the internet. There's more than just LitRPG there, but there are a lot of good LitRPG stories that people like. And the nominees for that one are Arcane Emperor, Everybody Loves Big Chance, Wandering In, Change New World. In addition to that, World Keeper, Fantasia. Oh, well, that's awesome. Fantasia. So there you go. We'll have a link in the show notes for all the actual polls. You can just click on it, go there, vote for whatever you want to, and there you go. You'll have your voice be heard. But make sure you do vote, because these awards represent you, the viewer, you, the reader, you, the listener, and the things that you love about LitRPG. So there you go. Okay. Also, in LitRPG news, we have a few more details about the DragonCon booth. That'll be at DragonCon. Well, of course, it will be. This is the LitRPG table that myself and other LitRPG authors are organizing almost spur of the moment, because one of us got an in with the organizer, and she kind of gave us a last minute cancellation table, which is really, really good. Like, it's a nice table up by the front entrance. It's in Hall 2, Floor 1. It's booth 1222, booth 1222. So there you go. Come visit us. If you're looking at the picture here, it's that one in red. So I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see where it is. So there you go. That's us right there. Okay. I believe that's it for the LitRPG news. Nope. Yep. We also have new books out in review for this week. Well, they came out this week. I'll review them next week probably. This includes Venia Online, a LitRPG Saga, Battle for Mesrath, a LitRPG Adventure, Grottos and Vixens, Total Immersion, The Dark World, LitRPG Adventure, Blood Rain, Dembo's Ditty. This one's actually called a LitRPG Gamebook, according to the description on the page. It's a choose-your-adventure style novel, but with cool game stats, weapons, skills, and funky spell songs to choose from. So I'll be looking forward to reading that on the plane. And also, Into the Black, Book 4. I'm not reviewing that one. I'm going to let you know. Remember, I had issues with the series, graphic torture, some rape scenes that were in the early books in the series. So I'm not going to review them, but you guys are all grown-ups. You decide if you want to read it or not. I'm just letting you know it's out. Also, it came out this week. Gong and Chalice, Epic LitRPG Adventure, Pharaoh Book 4. The fourth one in the Pharaoh series came out. Originally, it was published at $8.20. As of this recording, it is currently $6.95. I think the publishers read a bunch of comments about how expensive it was, and they didn't see their sales going up immediately, so they dropped it by about $1.20. So there you go. Also, for Escape from Hell, a LitRPG Adventure, Kingdom of Heaven Book 2 is also out. So there you go, guys. New audiobook releases that came out for LitRPG. We have Endgame, The Crucible Shard Book 7, and also Last Horizons Lie by Daniel Schinohofen. That's the book 2 in that series. So some good stuff. Endgame is The Crucible Shard Book 7. That's the last book in that series. I'm always surprised how quickly the audiobook versions of this thing come out after the release of the ebook version. It's like a month. So good on Skylar Grant for getting those out on a very quick manner. Okay, upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read off the stuff that's coming up. We have Starter Zone out on September 25th. We have On the Last Continent, Alter Game Book 2 out on September the 28th. We have Infinite Reality, Daggerland Online Novel 1. Now, this one's supposed to come out on September the 30th, but the author has contacted me saying it might be coming out as soon as next week if the editor for the project can get the manuscript finished and back to the author in time. But it more than likely going to be coming out a little bit early. On October the 4th, we have scheduled Desert Runner Patera Online Book 1. On October the 11th, we have A Game with No Rules, Perimeter Defense Book 4. And on November the 16th, all the way out to November, Shattered Lands Book 3. So there you go. On to some new releases and reviews. There you go. We should be back with my regular, normal face. Okay, new releases and reviews. I'm just going to read off my reviews to you folks. We have 6 new novels, I believe. And we're going to begin with The Shattered Lands LitRPG series, written by Darren Pillsbury. It is 527 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description of the novel. It's all fun and games until somebody dies. Welcome to the Shadowlands, the first truly immersive video game where you can see, hear, touch, taste, and feel the game. In this online fantasy world of dragons, elves, wizards, and magic, 2 best friends enter at the same time and take very different paths. Daniel desperately wants to break free of his nice guy life in the real world until his choices end in tragedy. Eric wants unlimited power by any means necessary. Assassin or summoner of demons, it makes no difference. Join them on their quest both inside the game and out as they navigate the violence, the triumphs, the treachery, and the danger of the Shattered Lands. So there you go. Okay, this is not a particularly long review. The novel overall was kind of meh for me. The game mechanics exist, but they aren't always consistent and they don't always make sense. And they're very much mostly informational. There's probably the most in-depth game mechanic that is described is the death penalty mechanic, where if somebody dies, they're locked out of the game for a certain period of time. Other than that, most of the stuff written in the novel feels very Portal Fantasy, in that it's not centered around any particular game mechanic or pressing buttons to activate a skill or even special abilities and skill. For the most part, being trained in magic is described as getting in touch with your mana, and combat is swinging a sword. Theft is more about being quick with your fingers than having a theft skill or a high theft skill. Much of the novel feels again like Portal fiction with kind of a veneer of RPG mechanics. Now, of course, this may be intentional because the author has an established non-lit RPG reader base. He has an entire other series. I think it's like Kids and Monsters or something. But again, that this kind of sort of happens whenever the new authors into the genre are coming in. They're trying to test the waters, but without alienating the people who are already fans of their work. That might be the case. Who knows? But the story itself is not that amazing either, unfortunately. The two characters, Daniel and Eric, they're really hard to root for. I have to say that Daniel is weak-willed and whiny. In the author description, he's even described as the nice guy role. In the actual novel, he comes off as just kind of whiny and weak. Eric is kind of just a mouthy jerk who constantly insults people, and when they do something about it, like push back or actually kind of get in his face, he feels all hurt and he vows vengeance. And actually in the novel he does it because he suddenly has power, and he can kind of get back at the people who he feels have wronged him, whether it's true or not. And so it's really hard to kind of root for either one of them or to empathize with them, which is one of the novel's biggest issues to me, because even if the action's good or the game mechanics are great, if I can't root for the main characters or empathize with them to some degree, then it's hard for me to enjoy the novel. The first 60% of the novel is almost entirely about the two characters training, and that's a really good section of the novel. They start off as like thieves and assassins, and then they change trainers, making much of what was described earlier in their training meaningless, or it feels at least pointless to me. And so that switch midstream was not welcome. I understand why the author did it, but it kind of made you feel like you kind of wasted your time earlier. There's a few plot points that are important, they carry over, but a lot of the training is just like, oh, that was pointless, let's move on. When the characters finally do go to adventuring at the 60% mark, it's not particularly interesting. You get some group dynamic stuff, with essentially a bunch of strangers, the main character and a girl that the main character Daniel likes. And there's some stuff that happens there that's occasionally interesting, but for the most part it's just kill stuff and betray things. So there you go. Overall, there's really nothing technically wrong with the story. Solid writing, not too many spelling errors or grammars that I could tell, but it just really wasn't that interesting to me. It gets a score of 5 out of 10. So there you go. Additionally, Shatterlines Book 2 is also out currently. I was planning to review it next week, but I'm not really super interested in the first one, so I'm going to be putting that one on the back burner. Maybe I'll come back to it at some other point. Okay, next story, Unexplored, Rise of the Crimson Kingdom, a LitRPG adventure, Book 0 in the Unexplored cycle. Okay, this is written by Alara Brandwin. It is 244 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description of the novel. Paul had waited months to play Unexplored, the latest fantasy VR MMORPG, boasting a realistic feel, exciting combat, and the opportunity to experience sensual pleasure. Even an extremely nervous and socially awkward guy like himself could live an exciting life. Unexplored was everything he could have dreamed. What he didn't expect, however, was joining a player guild led by a cunning megalomaniac who dealt in secrets and seemed intent on world domination. As Elf Estelar, Paul helped lead the guild to greatness, meeting new and interesting friends along the way. In return, he was rewarded with all the food, ale, women, and gold he could ever want. Life is awesome until he meets a down-on-her-luck dwarf named Von Wilcia during a caravan raid, which leads him to question himself and his role so far in the game. Wealth, power, and all their benefits were his to enjoy as a member of the Crimson Warriors. The only question was, How far was he willing to go to keep it? Warning, this book contains erotic content. Reader discretion is advised. Okay, I'm happy to see that the author at least put the disclaimer that there is adult content in this novel, and there is. I also put it in my review that there's graphic sex in this novel. This is actually a prequel to another book written by the same author called Unexplored Into the Wild Woods. If you didn't like that novel, you're not going to like this one either. There's sex. There's actually less LitRPG mechanics in this one than there is in the first one. And it's supposed to be sex scenes, domination, BDSM, and a fantasy LitRPG story mixed together. And I got to say the author's other novels that I've seen on Amazon, they're all primarily monster, fantasy, erotic fiction, and that's fine. In the context of this particular story, the sex scenes make contextual sense, I should say. And this is a perfectly fine sequel to that novel. If you've read the first one, you're getting a lot of nods like, oh, I remember that dude. Isn't that person going to come with this person? And, oh, I know what happens to that dude at the very end of the second novel, whatever it is. So you'll have another level of enjoyment, but it's not necessary to override Into the Wildwood before reading this one. This is LitRPG. No doubt about it. It's simply not very good LitRPG. The game mechanics in the story show up during combat mostly, and they're rather inconsistent. For example, combat scenes very early in the novel look and feel differently as far as the game mechanics go than they do at the very end of the novel. It's my hypothesis that the author wrote a good chunk of this story, maybe even all of it, as almost Portal Fantasy, and then later on went back and edited it to include LitRPG mechanics. And I'll talk about a few particular inches that kind of give you indicators of this. But there were, as far as examples of like inconsistent game mechanics, at the beginning of the novel, the main character kills some kobolds and rabbits, gets a couple levels, which is great. It's a beginning level section. There are no damage descriptors or XP numbers given, like specifically for monsters. So that is part of the issue of like not understanding how the world works. But there are statements about levels gained. However, later on in the story, not that long later, he helps wipe out an entire village of goblins and still only gains a single level. So a whole village of goblins versus a handful of rabbits and kobolds, yet you get more experience from the handful of rabbits and kobolds. See, the experience, and this is part of just not revealing enough about the game mechanics, is that there may very well be like a background information source. Well, oh, this all makes math sense, but that is not presented to the audience so that it makes sense to them as the reader. And so that is something that for me is like, oh, you implement a game mechanic, but you don't really describe it, and it doesn't really seem that important. Like if I had taken out those sentences about you gained a level, the story up to that point would really just be the same. And that's kind of a big recurring issue in this novel. In book one, I kind of had the same issue with it, is that in that the game mechanics were there, they were expressed, and they were really well described for the first portion of the novel, but then later on they just kind of disappeared. Thankfully, in this particular novel, the game mechanics do go through the entire thing, so there is some improvement in that respect, but they still just very much feel like, oh, there's some action here occasionally, and so we're going to say he leveled up, or later on it's like the main character is actually showing percentages of health, which is something that's not in the early or even midsection of the novel, and so combat is at least kind of the place where you're only going to use the game mechanics. Like all the rest of the story, whether this is sex scenes, verbal conversations, or just doing other things, nothing, and it feels and is written just like regular Portal Fantasy, and that's kind of a core issue I have with a novel, is that as LitRPG, if you're going to label it that, there should be probably some RPG stuff throughout the entire thing. And again, there is enough here that it is LitRPG. It's just not well detailed. It's not informational enough for me, at least. I would have loved to see more than just the characters leveling up occasionally. But that's like the game mechanic stuff. One of the bigger indicators that the author may have come in later and added the game mechanics is the fact that there's a point in the novel where the main character gets level 5. And then about 10% later, he levels up again, only he's still getting level 5. And then a little later after that, he's also, again, getting another level, but he's still level 5. And it's a small detail, but it does kind of show that The main character is essentially the game mechanics aren't being paid attention to. This may just be obviously just clerical, and I'm sure the author will fix it once they're aware of it. But it's just kind of indicated that the game mechanics of the novel just aren't that important to the author. They're paying much more attention to other things about the story, including sex or just other plot developments. And that's a choice. But for me, in the LitRPG novels I love the best, the game mechanics, the game world, are as important as the other characters. So that's just my opinion, though. Let's see. Okay, otherwise, story is fairly predictable. A couple of guys decide to play this great new game. They have a hard time raising their skills and leveling, so they join with these bad guys and this new guild. They do increasingly bad things, and then, this is a little spoilery, but eventually one of them starts to question what he's doing and leaves the guild. The other one stays. And then the guy who left eventually starts developing his relationships with other characters, and he starts an opposing guild. And that leads us right into the first book in the series. Remember, this is book 0. Now, onto the sex stuff. I basically skipped the sex scenes. I noted them in my notes where they were, how much overall percentages. There are regular sex scenes inserted in the novel, and it makes about 10% of the overall text in the novel. They started fairly tame, but they get increasingly BDSM and bondage themed. And if you've read Into the Wildwood, this makes sense. Like, this whole thing is a setup for what happens in that first book. Like, oh, this is where that guild came from. So there you go. And again, within context of the story, all the sex stuff makes sense. So it's not like it's just there to be tantalizing. It actually makes sense within the story, which is great. Personally, I just kept them and just made sense that they made sense contextually. Where, again, I have bigger issues with the story is that it's fairly predictable. From the introduction, you can kind of see where this is going. And, the introduction actually describes a good probably 70% of the novel as far as like how the plot goes. Again, yes, there are RPG mechanics as well, but for the most part, it feels like portal fiction with like a veneer of LitRPG. Again, it meets the minimum requirements of LitRPG, so I'm not dinging on that whatsoever. It's just that they don't really feel like they matter too much to the story to me, and that's a bigger issue. So for me, not a good read. It gets a score of 4 out of 10. So there you go. I know. Stuff. Okay, on to the next story. Here we go. It is going to be Out of Her Depth, A Tale of the City and the Dungeon, written by Matthew P. Schmitz. Okay, this one is 17 pages. That's right, 17 whole pages, 99 cents. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. And I think that's going to be an issue. I'll read you the author's description. Dave and his party are just looking for a replacement. Sam's looking for adventure and an escape from her parents. All of them are delvers, beings whose very attribute can be known as a number. Together they adventure into the depths of the immense dungeon, hunting for treasure and increased power. Only for things to go horribly, horribly wrong. Hope and despair struggle in this action-packed adventure set in the world of city and dungeon. Okay, this is a very quick review. Essentially, they're barely any RPG mechanics here. There's one decent fight scene at the end, and there's almost little to no world building or character development. I mean, it's 17 pages. There's not much you can do there. It's a super short story. It's essentially, 7 cents per page at this point, and I normally only like to pay about a penny a page. Amazon doesn't let you go below 99 cents, so that makes sense. What doesn't make sense is the fact that it's not on Kindle Unlimited, because you're super limiting your market, and I'm sure the author has plenty of reasons to not put on Kindle Unlimited. But I don't know that there are going to be many people who are going to read this for that short of a story for that price point, and that's going to be an issue for a lot of folks. And for me, it's really not worth the 99 cents. It's too expensive, and the story isn't really that great. So there you go. Gets a score of 4 out of 10. The end. Okay, on to our next story. Zandaria, the Unintentional Troll, Book 1 of the LitRPG Zandaria series. Zandaria LitRPG series. That's such a long title. Written by Fritz Foley. This is Book 1. Actually, I gotta like the cover. It's simple. It's quirky. And that's kind of what the story is. It's fun. This is 133 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. Alan is a troll. Just an internet troll. Well, at least for now. Zandaria, the world's first VR game, is set to release. with best friend retail workers Mark and Trevor towards the front of the line. When their horrible coworker Alan shows up unexpectedly and cuts in front to talk with them, things start to get a little hostile. Through a series of events, the three find themselves inside the world of Zandaria, where they learn of a tournament taking place in the week's time for $100,000. In order to compete, the three must find a fourth group member and reach level 5 within 3 days, and level 10 by the end of the week. If the harsh time limits weren't enough, they almost immediately find themselves locked up in jail, of course, thanks to Alan. So there you go. That's a really good description of the novel, to be honest. That's why I read it. The game mechanics in the novel are fairly standard. There's nothing particularly amazing, special, or new. Got character sheets, stats, classes, skills, abilities. There are reasonably detailed, so there's nothing to complain about them as far as my end. But there's also nothing that's new and different that's going to draw you in. That's not this kind of story. The story is focused on this ad hoc group getting to know each other and working towards reaching level 5 in this full immersion MMO so they can qualify to participate in a contest in the future. The scene switch between combat and a variety of humorous interactions between group members and the NPCs. And honestly, that's where the story's strength lies. It's the humor. There's tons of jokes, nerdy jokes, including the quest and the actual monsters in the story, and the banter between these four characters. The group's constantly teasing, joking, and harassing each other in a friendly way. It's a really cool kind of friend vibe there. This novel, in many ways, is a clean, non-cursing, non-poop-pooping version of Critical Failures. There's a loudmouth jerk that gets everyone in trouble, but no one can stay mad at him because he's a heart of gold. There's a guy that's awkward around girls, but is also very smart. There's a loyal best friend, of course, and an intelligent girl that can tease and joke as good as any of the guys. So she can give as good as she gets. And that is the core group. And that, again, really reminded me of Critical Failures and all the novels in that series. So if you like Critical Failure humor, but you don't like the cursing, this is definitely up your alley. The humor, for me, never reaches the absurd hilarity that Critical Failure has, but it also doesn't have the potty humor or the cursing. And so for some people, this is a lot more attractive because they don't like those aspects of that particular series. So for me, overall, a really good time reading it. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. There you go. That's it. Okay, on to the Savant Lands, The Lost Class. Okay. This is written by Lucas Dunn. So there you go. It is 220 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Limited. I will read you the author's description. Lucas is a sophomore in college that would rather spend time reading his favorite fantasy book alone than hang out with others. He has always taken comfort in being a loner, and especially action and adventure books that contain endless magic and action. When Vivid Corporations releases a new virtual reality game, The Savant Lands, unexpectedly early, Lucas can't help but be pulled to the game as it promises any gamer the ability to become a mighty king, a wealthy merchant, a powerful wizard, and much, much more. There must be dark rumors about the release of the game and the fact that it seems a little too real. But Lucien is determined to not let this opportunity pass him up. Follow Lucien as he gets pulled into the Savant Lands because, who knows, it could happen to anyone. Okay. This novel was released, I think, a couple weeks ago, and I kind of put it off because it didn't seem like the description of a LitRPG novel. When I read it, it felt very unreadable. But on the recommendation from someone from the LitRPG Facebook group, Anthony, I want to say Bauer, give it another chance. And I'm glad I did, personally. But I do forewarn you that this novel has a ton of technical writing issues on every single page, in every single paragraph. There are spelling, grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, paragraph structure stuff. The thing that bothered me the most is the fact that the author, for some reason, spelt while as WHY apostrophe LL. Like Y apostrophe LL. I'm like, that's not how you spell while. And there's a ton of that kind of stuff in there. And it's really going to bother a lot of people. But if you can look past that, if you can shut off your brain's portion, the grammar portion of your brain, you'll find a very good, well, I should say, a rather decent read. I enjoyed it personally, but it has a lot of things that I enjoy. It's not perfect, but it has some really cool game mechanic stuff and some good story things that I found enjoyable. despite the other issues. The novel gets into full immersion game world at the 2% mark, and it stays there with the main character only taking brief breaks to go back to the real world. During character creation, the game's AI tests the main character and determines he qualifies for a unique questline to bring back an ancient dark religion. This leads the main character to get unique powers and the opportunity to claim and abandon a fort. This is where we get our town building, community building aspects to it. Most of the story is spent as either town/community building and dungeon diving. So the town building community stuff aspects, the main character has like a civilization like interface where he can summon temporary workers, guards with mana, or he can summon permanent workers if he pays the in-game gold money equivalent. And apparently these NPCs who are permanent members of the community are a lot more expensive. So for the beginning portion of it, the main character is definitely relying on temporary workers, pulling from both his own mana pool and of course the fort's mana pool. So there's a lot of like nice, interesting resource management stuff as well. And because there are physical threats from other sources, not just kind of the wild place he lives, but also dungeons nearby. And because he's on the dark side, there's of course a bunch of light gods who are sending players towards him to murder him and to take his kingdom and destroy the new dark religion. The main character kind of has to balance what he's going to do, whether it's going to be crafting, building of the town, summoning NPC guards, warriors to help him level, or whatever. And a lot of the story is about those decisions and kind of the consequence of it. I always enjoyed kingdom and town building myself personally, and this does a really decent job of describing what those consequences are and kind of the decision-making process that someone would go through if they had to decide between these different resources and how to spend them. So I enjoyed that particular portion of it. And again, the other portion of the novel is essentially the main character in a variety of groups or by himself or with summon creatures going dungeon diving. And that's a very interesting mix in that sometimes when you're reading a town building story, you get a little bored with it. Like there's only so much you can take of looking at pages of possible things to summon and describing the things you want to plan out in the future. And so the author does a really good job of breaking up those scenes with, essentially action scenes where the characters are going dungeon diving and they fight a nice variety of monsters. And one of the things I noticed in the novel is that the author stops those fights from becoming stagnant by giving the main character new powers, new magic abilities on a fairly regular basis as he levels up and increases his reputation with the Dark God and does other things to get new powers and abilities. And those new abilities and skills are used very strategically in combat. Like the type of fighting the main character does at the beginning of the novel is very different than the type of fighting he's doing at the very end of the novel because he's become more powerful. He has access to new choices and new abilities that gives him a range of different strategies he can implement either on a small group level in a dungeon or on a massive scale against some invading army or whatever it is. At the same time, though, the main character never really becomes overpowered, which is a very hard balance to maintain. And he still makes bad decisions, and he still dies and has to respawn. And that I like that aspect of it as well. And that the main character he wasn't OP, he wasn't overpowerful, even though he got all these cool new powers and abilities. So there, I enjoyed it. The plot in the story is rather light, and it really just serves as a reason for the main character to fight and struggle to become more powerful. There's a plot line that I'm just mentioning because it's very early in the story, at the very beginning of the night, I believe, where the CEO is found dead after playing this game, and that story thread isn't even touched until like the 70% mark of the novel, and so that kind of shows you exactly how little real plot there is to the story. Most of that plot revolves around the main character bringing back a dark god and the Pantheon Light, sending armies to destroy this new religion. That's not resolved here in particular. I think it can be in the next book. But surviving this impending assault motivates the main character to upgrade his fort, to build it up, to build up his forces, and to seek out alliances from other dark races. And so that's kind of the overarching plot for the entire novel. Overall, had a good time reading the story. Once my brain adjusted to ignore all the grammar, all the spelling and structural issues, I am going to take that into consideration when I'm scoring this novel because, again, the author's asking people to pay for this novel. It's not just free on the internet anymore. And so whenever that's the case, I think it's fair to, judge this kind of technical stuff. But for me, I had a good time with it. I would normally give it a 7 out of 10 if the writing was basically better. But because it isn't, I'm knocking it down a point, and I think that's pretty fair. It loses a point for all the technical issues it has, and it gets a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, we have the strategy series Pawn by J.C. Ahern. Okay, this one is 416 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. The outcome of the match is a matter of life or death. 17-year-old Rogue has always classified herself as socially awkward, preferring video games over a trip to a mall. When she wakes up in a forest, she finds that life as she knew it has changed forever, and she cannot remember how. In fact, she can't remember the last 6 months at all. As she navigates this new world, she soon discovers a talent for combat and survival she's never had before. A handy ability in a world where humans compete in a game governed by rules she can't remember. Ronan, a talented 19-year-old, was wrenched from his Midwest home and forced to compete with a SCSI set. Despite the set's repeated losses, Ronan has proven himself a powerful player, his sights set on surviving each match, no matter the cost. When a new pawn is added to his set to replace the one lost, Ronan begins to break out of a shell he built around himself and re-examines what he and the other humans have become. So there you go. Honestly, the price point is really spot on. 460 pages, $3.99. It is also on Kindle Unlimited, so I encourage you to read it there if you have that program. This was originally published in September of 2015. Not set, but September. The author of the novel says that she wrote it as YA science fiction. She says that the story originated with a desire to write a story that included a virtual reality adventure game with co-op, and that her gamer background influenced the story a lot. And it's true. When you're reading this, not when I was reading the novel, I should say, there are tons of game references. There's a fairly detailed game mechanics description. Again, this is not written as LitRPG, so seeing that here was a huge surprise to me. I expected, fairly light game mechanics, and they're relatively detailed once you get to about the 60% mark of the story, which I'll get to in a second. But essentially, this novel is not something I would have picked up normally, but the author contacted me to see if this novel was considered LitRPG. I believe she's considering writing books 2 and 3 in this series. And she kind of wanted to see if there was another audience for this novel besides the YA science fiction community. And I'm happy to say that it is. There's some caveats to the fact that it's LitRPG, which I'll get into. But I'm happy to say that this is, even if it wasn't written as LitRPG. And I'll go over just real quick. There are 2 basic requirements that the LitRPG community on Facebook has come to agreement on as to what constitutes LitRPG. 2 simple things, and they kind of come from the format of 1, the story exists as an RPG game world or a world with expressly stated RPG mechanics. There's a ton of ways to do this. You can put any mechanics you want to. In this particular novel, the main character and her teams are players in a virtual reality deathmatch game with a chess theme, which is hence the cover. White pieces, black pieces. Players are designated as different chess pieces who have different their own powers. Queens have control powers. Knights have a flying vehicle. And everyone knows they're in a game. The game mechanics aren't hidden from anybody. So it already hits the first requirement right off the bat. The second requirement for LitRPG. The main characters progress in an expressly stated way according to those game mechanics. And again, there's a number of ways to do this, leveling up, increase skills, whatever the case is. In this particular instance, the main character gains levels as she progresses. She becomes more powerful, not just to the game system, but also as a person, which is always a nice mix. As a player, when she defeats her opponents, she gets experience points, and that leads to increased levels and weapon upgrades and unlock skills and items. And as the character gains enough levels, she gets new ranks, even more new abilities, new skills. There are health bars, though there are no numbers. And eventually, there's a fairly detailed description of how the game world works, including how pieces get new skills and abilities. It's nicely detailed when you get to it. Okay, now for the caveats. Remember, this novel was not written as LitRPG, which existed in 2015 technically, but I'm not surprised that nobody heard about it. The first 60% of the novel has a minimal amount of game mechanics described. The main character wakes up in a game world, not remembering who she is or what's happening. This is going to be a little slightly spoilery, but it needs to be described for you to understand exactly the kind of caveats or the technicalities I'm talking about. So the main character in the novel just wakes up not knowing who she is. Doesn't know her name. She has a few brief memories about her past, but she doesn't know who she is or why she's there in whatever place it is. And so that is used as a discovery period for the main character to discover where she is, that there are people trying to hunt and kill her, and that, if she kills them first, she can gain their experience points and grow up more powerful, basically, and get weapons upgrade and such. But most of that first section of the novel, the first 60% of it, centers around that first death match. And again, there's just enough LitRPG mechanics here to say, oh, this is LitRPG. Main character levels up. Everybody knows, well, almost everybody except for her, knows that it's a game. The perspective in the novel also shifts between herself and Ronan, which is why they're both described in the author's description. And so from his point of view, things are also described. So that's how the reader gets a little more information about the game mechanics in that first 60%. But again, the game mechanics are fairly light there. It's very combat oriented, and also a little YA oriented, which I'll get into a little bit. Now, as far as game mechanics go, it's not until the 60% mark, where the main character wakes up after winning that first match, that most of the game mechanics are fully detailed and explored and explained in all the detail that I enjoyed. Items and skills can be purchased using gold or viewer appreciation points that are given by watchers who watch this live streaming deathmatch. There are a lot of skill options, including magic, control, stealth, healing, and damage abilities, and skills that the characters can purchase. And the ones that the main character chooses are well described. As far as like reading in the text, you might be a little distracted by the fact that they're not formatted the way a lot of LitRPG skills are or descriptions. But again, written before the author knew about us. So, don't mark her for that. And there's a lot of good virtual reality training sequences that increase skills and abilities. And like I said, there's a ton of details after that 60% mark, which I was really pleasantly surprised to see and happy to see in the first place. Story-wise, there's a lot of stuff here as far as like different themes and genre stuff here. The first half of the novel feels like a mix of the Hunger Games with YA teen drama and some light little RPG mechanics. The combat is, again, very well written, and it's kind of the focus of that first section. But I found the jealous teen drama stuff and the romance aspects of the novel fairly annoying in that first section. Again, I'm not saying that it's poorly written or anything. It's just that I'm a 35-year-old Hispanic male who's married, and I'm probably not the target audience for that kind of stuff. The YA drama is probably the part I liked least about this novel. But again, it was the author's choice. That's kind of the genre she was writing for at that time. She wasn't writing for lit RPG audience. Okay. In the last half of the novel, after the 60% mark, that's the section I really did enjoy the most. After that first match is won, the main character wakes up, and it kind of takes a really cool sci-fi twist. It's revealed, again, this is spoilery, that aliens have conquered the Earth, humanity has become slaves, forced to fight in these virtual reality death matches. And the sci-fi aspects are really well introduced, they're well described, and they seem relatively plausible, which is always a good thing for science fiction. There are also personal revelations about the main character, her past, who she really is, and those revelations are kind of cool in themselves. There's also an expanded game section, which I've talked about a little bit. But there's also revelation about the game's purpose, hidden rules, features, and even some background and history for the larger universe, including for some of the aliens. And again, the YA stuff, the YA teen drama romance stuff still exists here, but it's not nearly as prevalent. And because I understand more about your world and the universe, even that stuff, it becomes a little more tolerable and less annoying because I understand what's happening. And that's kind of a good thing in my opinion. Overall, I have to say I really enjoyed the last half of the novel. I'd easily give that section a 7 out of 10. A good recommend. However, because the first 60% of the novel is not bad, it also left me feeling lost as to what the point of the deathmatch was. Like the action, really solid. But as far as like explaining what things are happening, me understanding as a reader what's occurring beyond jealous YA stuff and just the need for the main character to survive, that is not fully fleshed out in the first section, which lessened it for me. So for overall, I'm going to give it a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Better than meh. Not quite good overall, but again, you could actually just like jump into the 60% of the novel and have a really good time in this novel. Then that might be what some people do. But for me, like I said, I wanted to like it more, but the first 60% kind of drew, because again, not written as RPG, and I'm really trying not to hold it against it because, I can't hold against an author who didn't write LitRPG. But at the same point, I'm judging this as LitRPG. And so there's that kind of conflict in my brain. And so, like I said, I really enjoyed the last half though. So 6 out of 10 for me for Pawn the Strategy Series Book 1. There you go. That's it. We're done, ladies and gentlemen. Got 6 novels out for you. I'm usually get more, but again, only a couple days to read and review this week because I'm taking off for DragonCon super early in the morning. And I'll be flying all day, and then I'll be getting there and doing stuff there. So there you go. Thanks for listening and hanging out with me. You can follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, all those great places. And if you enjoy the podcast and you want to support us in any way, shape, or form, you can do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But there you go, folks. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me. I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen or to watch the podcast. I do this because I love the genre and I love you guys. So thanks for spending your time with me as well. Until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Oh, and before I forget, I will be streaming live when I'm at DragonCon, also doing some recordings with some authors and maybe some author games. We'll have to wait and see. But if you're going to be in Atlanta, Georgia for DragonCon, come by, hang out, come check out our table, come talk to the authors of stuff hopefully you enjoy. We're more than happy to chat with you, sign stuff. I think other guys are selling merchandise, so you can get some cool stuff as well. So until I see you again, folks, remember, read some LitRPG. See you later. Bye.